In 1959, a housewife in Leeds fed a family of 5 on 32 shillings a week. She never threw away a tomato, never lost a lettuce, never let a loaf go to waste before it was finished. Her daughter said the larder always looked full. The secret was not money, it was knowledge. Number 7 on this list was so effective, her neighbor started doing it the same week she saw it. These 25 secrets cost nothing to use, and your supermarket is counting on you never finding out about them. Number 25. Preserve seasonal fruit while it is cheap. This was the one that separated the women who managed from the women who struggled. In July, when strawberries came in at threepence a punnet from the farm gate, your grandmother did not eat them and move on. She bought as many as she could carry, and she got to work. Some went into jam, sealed in clean jars with waxed paper circles pressed across the surface before the lid went on. Some were layered into a preserving pan with sugar and bottled in sterilized glass while the kitchen filled with steam and sweetness. Some simply went into the coldest part of the larder packed in sugar. By November, when fresh strawberries cost 6 times as much and tasted of nothing, she was still eating summer. A pound of sugar cost 4pence in 1955. The jam it produced lasted 8 months. That arithmetic is still available to anyone willing to spend an afternoon at the stove when the price is right. Thought this was a good one? Wait for the next one. Number 24. Use stale cake or biscuits in puddings. Nothing left the British kitchen in the wrong form. Cake that had gone dry was not cake anymore. It was the base of a trifle, the crumble layer of a pudding, the biscuit crust of a cheesecake before cheesecakes had a fashionable name. A tin of stale digestives was crushed with a rolling pin, mixed with melted butter, and pressed into a dish. Yesterday's sponge was torn into pieces, soaked in a splash of sherry or fruit juice, and layered with custard and jam into something that a restaurant would charge 2 shillings for. The transformation was total. The waste was 0. For a senior eating alone, a small piece of leftover birthday cake that had gone hard at the edges became 3 days of pudding with a little fruit and cream. Stale was not the end. It was the beginning of the next thing. And you don't know what is waiting for you at number 1. Number 23. Make soup from vegetable scraps. The stock pot was never empty. Leek tops, onion skins, carrot peels, celery leaves, the woody ends of parsley, the outside leaves of a cabbage that were too tough to eat raw. All of it went into a large pot, covered with cold water and brought slowly to a simmer. An hour later, strained through a colander, what remained was a quart of golden vegetable stock that cost nothing because it was made entirely from things that would otherwise have gone into the bin. This was not a recipe. It was a reflex. Your grandmother did not think of it as cooking. She thought of it as the obvious thing to do with what was left. A cube of bought stock cost a halfpenny in 1958. Her homemade version cost nothing and tasted of the actual vegetables rather than salt and dried powder. The bin was the last resort. The pot was always first. Number 22. Keep apples separate from other fruit. She did not put apples in the fruit bowl with the bananas and the pears. They lived apart, in the larder, in a cool corner, wrapped individually in squares of newspaper or laid separately on a wooden rack. This was not fussiness. An apple releases ethylene gas continuously, and everything sitting within reach of that gas ripens faster than it should. A bowl of mixed fruit with 2 apples at the center turns to mush in 4 days. The same fruit without the apples lasts 8. Your grandmother had never heard the word ethylene. She had simply watched what happened when she stored things together versus apart, and she remembered. The pears went soft. The bananas went black. The lesson was learned once and never forgotten. Fruit, like people, keeps better with a little space. Number 21. Store cheese in wax paper. The block of cheddar that came home from the cheese counter went straight into the larder, wrapped in wax paper, never cling film. Wax paper allows the cheese to breathe. It maintains just enough moisture at the surface to stop the rind from cracking and drying while preventing the damp, sealed conditions that turn the inside rubbery and the outside furry. A good piece of cheddar wrapped in wax paper on the cool marble shelf of a larder lasted 3 to 4 weeks in perfect condition. The same cheese sealed in cling film begins to suffer within 5 days. The moisture cannot escape. The surface sweats. Mold finds exactly the warm, damp environment it is looking for. Your grandmother's wax paper cost 6 pence for a roll that lasted 6 months. The cheese inside it lasted the month. Both sums worked out. Number 20. Use leftover roast meat in next day meals. The Sunday joint was never one meal. It was 4. The roast itself on Sunday, sliced hot with vegetables and gravy. Cold cuts on Monday, laid out with pickle and bread and whatever was left of the roasted potatoes. The carcass or the bone into a pot on Tuesday with an onion and a carrot for soup. Whatever meat remained, picked off and stirred into a pie on Wednesday with leftover vegetables in a short crust lid made from flour and dripping. By Thursday, the joint that fed 5 on Sunday had fed 5 again 4 times over. The cost per head across those 4 meals was a fraction of the cost of buying separate ingredients for 4 separate dinners. This was not thrift for its own sake. It was intelligent kitchen management that simply refused to accept that a single meal was the only use for a piece of good meat. Pattern break 1. Here is what the modern food industry does not want you to notice. The average British household today spends more on groceries than at any point in recorded history, and throws away more food than at any point in recorded history. Those two facts are not in conflict. They are the same fact. An industry that profits from selling you food also profits when that food spoils and you come back to buy more. Your grandmother operated in a system where coming back to buy more was genuinely not possible. The money did not exist, so she stored things correctly, used everything twice, turned the end of one meal into the beginning of the next, and fed her family well on what the modern household would consider an impossible budget. The knowledge that made that possible has not become outdated. It has been systematically replaced by packaging that accelerates spoilage and marketing that sells convenience as progress. Number 19. Keep milk cold in the coldest part of the fridge, not the door. Never the door. The fridge door is the warmest part of the appliance, subject to the greatest temperature fluctuations as it opens and closes throughout the day. Milk stored in the door experiences repeated temperature changes that encourage bacterial growth and accelerate souring. Your grandmother, before the fridge was common, kept her milk in the coldest corner of the larder, in the darkest spot, away from the range and away from the window. When the fridge arrived, she applied the same logic and put the milk on the bottom shelf at the back, where the temperature was most stable and consistently cold. A pint of milk cost 4 pence in 1955 and arrived fresh each morning from the doorstep. None of it was wasted if it was kept correctly. The same principle applies today. The door is for condiments. The milk belongs at the back. Number 18. Wrap leafy greens in cloth or paper. Lettuce, spinach, spring greens, watercress. None of them went into the fridge damp and unwrapped. Your grandmother separated the leaves, dried each one individually on a clean tea towel, then layered them loosely in a bowl between sheets of dry kitchen paper, covered with a slightly damp cloth to prevent the edges from curling. The paper absorbed moisture. The damp cloth above maintained just enough humidity to stop the leaves from drying and browning. Stored this way, a head of lettuce that would turn to sludge in 3 days, left damp and loose in a fridge drawer, lasted a full week in perfect condition. The principle is simple. Leaves go slimy when they sit in their own moisture. They go brown when they dry out. The paper manages both problems simultaneously. One method, 2 failures prevented. Number 17, freeze ginger. Ginger root bought at the greengrocer in the 1960s was 6 pence for a piece large enough to last a month, but fresh ginger left on the shelf dried out and turned woody within 10 days of purchase. Your grandmother solved this without a recipe book and without any instruction. The ginger went into the coldest part of the larder, wrapped in a dry cloth. Later, when the home freezer became available, it went directly into the freezer hole, unpeeled, in a small paper bag. Frozen ginger grates directly from the freezer on a fine grater with no peeling required. The skin grates away to nothing. The flesh stays completely fresh, fragrant, and ready to use indefinitely. The piece you bought in October is still perfect in March. Not reduced, not dried, not composted. Fully usable, as it was the day it arrived. Number 16. Make jam from soft fruit. The fruit that was starting to yield too much under the thumb, the plum with one soft spot, the strawberries going slightly darker at the shoulder, the apples beginning to wrinkle. None of it was thrown away. It went into the preserving pan. Soft fruit that has begun to over-ripen has higher sugar content than fruit at peak ripeness, which makes better jam. Your grandmother knew this empirically because she had made jam from both and tasted the difference. A pound of slightly overripe plums and 3/4 of a pound of sugar simmered in one pan for 25 minutes and poured into a sterilized jar made enough jam to last 6 weeks. The fruit that cost threepence and was about to be wasted became a jar worth considerably more at the farm gate. The economics were not incidental. They were the entire point. Number 15. Pickle surplus vegetables. When the garden produced more cucumbers than the family could eat fresh, when the cabbage harvest came in faster than anyone could cook it, when there were too many onions ripening at once, the answer was always vinegar. A basic pickling brine of white vinegar, water, salt, and a little sugar brought to a boil and poured over sliced vegetables, packed into clean jars, created preservation that lasted months without refrigeration. Pickled cucumber kept for 12 weeks on the larder shelf. Pickled red cabbage lasted longer. Pickled onions, made every autumn from the surplus of the allotment, were still being eaten at Christmas with cold cuts. A bottle of white vinegar cost threepence in 1957 and could preserve enough vegetables to save 2 weeks of grocery spending. The surplus that would have rotted became the reserve that kept the household eating through the lean months. Pattern break 2. Here is what was designed out of British homes and what it cost. Between 1965 and 1985, the larder disappeared from new-build British houses almost entirely. The cool, north-facing room that maintained a natural temperature of 10 to 14 degrees Celsius all year round, perfect for cheese, fruit, bread, root vegetables, and preserved goods, was replaced by fitted kitchen units and fridge-freezer combinations. The fridge runs at 4 degrees. That is the right temperature for a narrow range of foods. It is the wrong temperature for tomatoes, onions, potatoes, stone fruit, bread, garlic, and most of the items that a well-stocked British household needs to keep. When the larder went, the knowledge of what belonged in it went with it. An entire generation learned to put everything in the fridge and wonder why things still spoiled. The fridge was not an upgrade. It was a replacement of a precision system with a single blunt one. Number 14. Turn stale bread into breadcrumbs. The loaf that had gone beyond rescuing as toast was not finished. It was dried further. Slices laid on a rack near the range or in a low oven for an hour until they were completely dry and hard, then broken into pieces and rubbed through a colander or crushed under a rolling pin between 2 clean cloths, until what remained was a jar of fine, dry, golden breadcrumbs that kept on the shelf for 3 months without any refrigeration at all. Breadcrumbs coated the fish before it went into the pan. They topped the macaroni cheese before the grill. They stuffed the mushrooms before the oven. They thickened the soups and bound the fish cakes. A jar of bought breadcrumbs cost 4pence in 1960. Your grandmother's cost nothing and tasted better because they were made from actual bread rather than industrial dried grain. The loaf had one more life in it. She always found it. Number 13. Freeze leftover cheese. Hard cheese that was not going to be eaten within the week did not sit in the larder until it went blue at the edges. It went into the coldest part of the larder and later into the freezer, wrapped tightly in wax paper and then in a second layer of cloth. Frozen cheddar, Lancashire, or double Gloucester loses a small amount of texture when thawed and is no longer ideal for eating in slices. But for cooking, it is entirely indistinguishable from fresh. Melted into a cheese sauce, grated over a gratin, stirred into scrambled eggs, it performs identically. A quarter block of cheese that might have been wasted at the end of the week became the foundation of 3 cooked meals a month later. Nothing was spent twice. Nothing was replaced that did not need replacing. Number 12. Use older food first. This was not a tip, it was a discipline. When the new groceries came in on market day, everything in the larder moved forward. The older onions came to the front of the bin. The older jar of jam moved to the front of the shelf. The eggs from earlier in the week were placed at the front of the rack so they were used before the fresh ones. The newer purchases went behind. This required 30 seconds of attention every week and prevented the slow accumulation of forgotten things at the back of the shelf that turned to mold and waste over the course of a month. Your grandmother did not have a system for this because she had read about it. She had a system because she had once lost an entire pot of dripping to the back of the larder, and the lesson cost her money she could not afford to lose twice. Number 11. Store potatoes away from onions. Potatoes and onions stored together accelerate each other's decline. The gases each one emits in storage trigger sprouting and softening in the other. Your grandmother kept them in separate corners of the larder, each in its own Hessian sack, each away from light and moisture, each in the cool air that kept them dormant. Potatoes stored in a dark, cool, dry place, away from onions, away from apples, away from any other produce, last months without sprouting or going green. The same potatoes stored under the kitchen sink in a plastic bag alongside onions go soft and sprouted within a fortnight. A stone of potatoes cost 1 shilling and sixpence in 1958. Kept correctly, they lasted until the new season's crop came in. Kept wrongly, half of them were lost before the month was out. Number 10. Keep onions in a dry, dark place, not the fridge, where moisture turns their outer skins damp and soft within days, not the kitchen counter, where warmth and light trigger sprouting within a week. The onion wants cool air, dry conditions, and darkness. A mesh bag hanging from a hook in the larder. An old stocking. Each onion dropped in and separated by a knot so they cannot press against each other and trap moisture between their skins. Hanging in this way, with air circulating around every surface, a string of onions lasted from the autumn harvest through the deep of winter without a single one going to black rot. Your grandmother bought onions in bulk when they were cheapest, stored them correctly, and had onions in January for the same price she paid in September. The stocking on the hook cost nothing. The saving was real every single week. Pattern break 3. Here's the number that should change how you look at your own kitchen. The Love Food Hate Waste campaign estimated that the average British household throws away the equivalent of 6 full meals every single week. Not because the food was unavailable, not because anyone forgot to buy it, because it was stored incorrectly, allowed to spoil and replaced. Every item on this list addresses a specific storage failure. Every trick your grandmother used was developed in a domestic economy where replacing spoiled food was genuinely not an option. The knowledge is not complicated. It does not require equipment. It does not require a bigger fridge or a smarter kitchen. It requires the same attention that a woman in a terraced house in 1958 gave to her larder every morning before she did anything else. She checked what was there. She moved things forward. She dealt with what needed dealing with. The larder was the first job of the day, not the last thought. Number 9. Soak limp vegetables in cold water. When the celery had gone soft at the tips, when the lettuce had lost its crispness, when the carrots had gone slightly bendy in the middle of the week, your grandmother filled the largest bowl she owned with cold water and submerged them completely for 20 to 30 minutes. The cells rehydrated, the turgor pressure returned, the celery snapped again, the lettuce straightened, the carrots firmed. Most wilting in vegetables is simple dehydration. The cells are intact, the structure is sound. All that has been lost is water, and water can be returned. This revival method works on cabbage, spring onions, radishes, broccoli, and most root vegetables. It does not work on leaves already turning yellow or flesh already soft with decay. But for the vast majority of midweek vegetable sag, it converts something apparently finished into 2 more days of perfectly usable produce. Number 8. Use a butter bell, a small clay pot, a lid shaped like a bell, and cold water changed daily in the shallow dish below. The butter was packed firmly into the inverted lid, and the water created an airtight seal when it was lowered into place. No air contact, no oxidation, no rancidity. The butter stayed soft enough to spread directly from the bell at any time, never refrigerator hard, never melting on a warm afternoon. A butter bell in the 1950s cost about $1 and lasted for decades. The butter inside it, kept at room temperature in this way, remained in perfect condition for up to 4 weeks. Your grandmother did not take butter from the fridge and wait for it to soften. She did not tear the bread trying to spread a cold block across it. She lifted the lid, and it was ready. This is still the correct way to keep butter. It was always the correct way. Number 7. Add a pinch of salt to milk. 1 pinch of fine salt, added to a pint of fresh milk on the day it was opened. Not enough to taste. Not enough to detect in tea or porridge or a white sauce. Enough to create a very slightly inhospitable environment for the bacteria responsible for souring. Salt is a preservative at any concentration, but at this level, the effect on flavor is entirely undetectable, while the effect on shelf life is measurable. In the 1950s, when a pint arrived on the doorstep every morning in a glass bottle with no refrigeration until it was brought inside, and when a warm July day could turn an unattended pint by afternoon, this pinch was insurance. A pint cost 4p. Souring it before it was used ruined the day's baking, the children's tea, and 6p worth of ingredients that went down the drain with it. The pinch of salt cost nothing. The milk it saved was real money every time. Number 6. Store tomatoes at room temperature. A tomato put in the fridge stops ripening. The cold halts the enzymatic processes that develop flavor and color, and it causes cell damage to the flesh that makes the texture mealy and the taste flat. Your grandmother kept her tomatoes on the windowsill, stem end down, always stem end down. The stem scar is the most porous point on the fruit, the place where moisture escapes fastest and where bacteria enter most readily. Resting the tomato on that point slows both problems simultaneously. At room temperature, stored this way on the sill in the indirect light, tomatoes lasted 4 to 5 days longer than refrigerated ones and tasted considerably better when they got there. A pound of tomatoes from the market cost 6p in 1958. None of them were put in the cold and ruined. They sat on the sill and were eaten at their best every time. Number 5. Separate bananas from the bunch. When the bananas came home from the market, they came off the bunch immediately, each one pulled apart individually and kept slightly separated from the others. Ethylene gas is produced most intensely at the stalk end of a banana, and when bananas are bunched together, that gas circulates directly between them, accelerating ripening across the whole bunch simultaneously. Separated, each banana produces its own gas, but is no longer being gassed by its neighbors at close range. The bunch that would have gone uniformly black by Tuesday lasted into the following week, each banana ripening at its own pace, available to be eaten one at a time rather than all at once or not at all. A bunch of 6 cost 3p in 1960. 3p was not a sum that anyone could watch turn to mush on the counter without it meaning something. Number 4. Freeze herbs in oil. Parsley, thyme, rosemary, tarragon, chives. Whatever was growing in the garden or bought in surplus from the market. Your grandmother chopped them fine, packed them into the sections of an ice cube tray, covered each one with a thin layer of oil, and placed the tray in the coldest part of the larder. Later, with the home freezer available, they went straight in. Each cube contained a portion of herb oil ready to go directly into a hot pan, a soup, or a sauce. The herb released its flavor into the oil as it melted. No waste, no wilting. No brown parsley going to nothing in the bottom of the vegetable drawer. A bunch of fresh parsley that could not all be used in 1 week became 12 herb cubes that lasted until the following spring. The flavor was preserved with the herb. Both lasted. Number 3. Keep herbs in water like flowers. Before the freezer, before the ice cube tray, before any of that. There was a glass of cold water on the kitchen windowsill and a bunch of parsley standing in it, trimmed at the base exactly as you would trim a bunch of flowers, covered loosely with an upturned glass or a clean, damp cloth over the top. Herbs are still living when you buy them. They are cut stems, drawing moisture. Standing them in water allows them to continue drawing moisture through the stems, keeping the cells intact, the color vivid, the fragrance strong. A bunch of coriander or mint standing in a glass of water in a cool kitchen lasts a full week longer than the same bunch sealed in a plastic bag in the bottom of the fridge drawer, where it yellows, slimes, and turns to nothing by Wednesday. This method costs nothing. It requires a glass of water and 30 seconds of attention. Number 2, wrap celery in foil, not cling film, not a plastic bag. Not the bag it came in from the supermarket, which is already working against you. Tin foil, the difference matters entirely. Cling film traps ethylene gas around celery, causing it to go limp and bitter within days. Tin foil allows the ethylene to escape while still retaining the moisture that keeps the stalks firm and crisp. Celery wrapped tightly in a single layer of tin foil and kept in the coolest part of the fridge stays snapping clean for up to 4 weeks. Your grandmother bought celery at the market for 4p a head in 1957, and it lasted the month. The modern version comes in a plastic sleeve already sweating against itself. Transferred to foil within an hour of purchase, that same celery doubles or triples its useful life. 1 action, 1 minute, 4 weeks of crisp celery instead of 10 days of limpness. Number 1. Store bread cut side down, the most overlooked trick of all and the one with no equipment, no preparation, and no cost whatsoever. When your grandmother cut a loaf, she placed it immediately cut side down on the wooden breadboard, where it stayed until the next slice was needed. The exposed crumb of a cut loaf is the most vulnerable surface. Moisture escapes fastest from the soft interior. By resting the cut face against the board itself acts as a seal, slowing moisture loss significantly on the one surface that needs it most. The crust, which remained intact all the way around the rest of the loaf, continued doing its job of protecting the inside from the air. A loaf stored cut side down on a clean wooden board stayed genuinely fresh for a full day longer than the same loaf left with its cut end exposed. She did not wrap it, she did not bag it. She set it down correctly. That was all. Share in the comments which one you are going to try. If this was useful for you, hit subscribe for more videos like this. These secret tricks are still here. They have been waiting. Now you know where to find them.